Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankarashaya Madhyamam Asmadasharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Mohi Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharantam Agocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satiguru Pranatosh Mahamo Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. Welcome to our Vivekachudamani. Last week we stopped at verse 48. Verse 48 introduced the prana, the vital air, that without which we are no longer dynamic, and animated and mobile. We would be like static without the prana. Prana is this intelligent, vital air designed to operate all our systems and make us living, alive organisms. The prana endowed with the 5 organs of actions. So it's interesting to understand that the prana is an energy that is rajasic. It's mostly constituted by rajoguna, and it activates the 5 organs of actions, and then it activates the instruments of action, the physical instruments as well. So we depends this rajoguna energy, which is the constitution of this intelligent vital air called prana. So this prana, endowed with the 5 organs of actions, pervades the physical body, and it's called pranamaya kosha, because it seemingly hides the self. Limitless awareness appears as this energy that moves the body, and we know that because a dead body does not have this vital air come in and out and in, and therefore its functions, its organs and everything start fading, and the body is said to be dead. So we covered some of it last week. The gross elements are predominantly tamasic, tamas. So we know that physical material matter, it's mostly constituted by tamas. So everything in the world, in the universe, is constituted by the 3 energies. The 3 energies are always there. It's only a question of predominance or dominance. So the physical body, we looked into the food body, the manomaya kosha, the physical kosha. We saw that it's a bag of matter, of bones, flesh, blood, waste, and things like that. So it's all matter, physical, material matter. And this matter that we call the body, it has, of course, some rajas to it, and has some sattva, because it needs sattva to keep it together and to keep it intelligently, alive and so on, following its nature, its function. So it needs sattva, it needs the intelligence there. So, but the physical body predominantly is constituted by tamas, tamoguna, okay? On the other hand, pranas, this vital air, is mostly constituted by rajoguna. So we need a lot of rajas to activate our system. So, and our organs of actions and all our autonomous system. It needs a lot of this rajasic, intelligent energy called prana, the vital air. We call the tamas is inactive and rajas is active. So tamas is not only flat and does not really reflect activity and does not reflect consciousness, sentience, it does not produce action, is inactive. So tamas is just flat, it does not move. Okay, it's inert, and it's inert to the extent that it offers no dynamism. It does not move, it does not do anything. On the other hand, we say that rajas is a very active energy. So this rajas, by which this intelligent vital air, is constituted, it is an active, dynamic, intelligent energy, air, that somehow makes the body dance, makes the body, just do its things. Without rajas, nothing moves, it says. Without tamas, there is nothing to be moved. How nice, huh? Without rajas, nothing can move. And then without tamas, there is nothing for rajas to move. No, we need tamas, that wants the energy that gratifies to become the matter. And this matter is animated, it's vivified by pranas. And pranas is going to move, activate, make it dance. Samsara, the world of changing appearance, is tamas kept in constant motion by rajas. How nice. Samsara, the world of changing appearance, everything is changing, moving, coming and being dissolved, is tamas kept in constant motion by rajas. Very nice, beautifully put. The previous verse said that the body is ever changing. This ceaseless physical transformation is due to prana, rajas. When we say that the body is in constant change, we have examined that the body does not remain the same from a moment to a moment over a certain number of years. They say in about 7 years, all the cells of our body, they were already replaced. So it's a new body, basically. So this body is all the time change. It's an ever-changing phenomenon. And this changing phenomenon is due to this energy called pranas, rajas. When prana leaves the body, it again becomes inert. So the body becomes just flesh and bones. Once prana leaves the body, it becomes inert. It does not move, which is its intrinsic state as an assemblage of elements. Okay, so the body, I don't know why we have stepped back to talk about the physical body, but anyhow, when prana leaves the body, it becomes inert, and the body, as we have determined already in the previous class, is just inert matter. It does not move, it does not think, it does not shine with mind or consciousness. It's just a meat tube, like Ramji likes to put, It does not serve any other purpose except the one of allowing us through our instruments of action, the instruments of reception, of the sense, the organs of reception and the organs of action. So we need this physical body so that our mind and our pranas, they can operate, transacting in the field and work and grow, work our karma and grow. So we need the body, but the body by itself is the lowest, so to speak, of these factors aligned to allow consciousness as a jiva interact with the field so that it can in due time understand, and get out of samsara altogether. Anybody interested of coming out of samsara, by the way? The previous verse said that the body is ever changing. When prana leaves, the body again becomes inert, which is an intrinsic state as an assemblage of elements. Prana is sometimes called the atma, the self. the soul of the body. In some cultures we consider this prana the life, it's the self, the soul of the body. But as we know, I mean, in Vedanta we know this fine distinction between prana, between the mind, between the intellect. Understand? So although the prana is properly integrated in the subtle body, we know that the subtle body is much more than the vital air. Therefore, the vital air being just the energy that activates, it's almost as it's the energy that connects the subtle body with the physical body and vivifies the physical body. It needs the mind, it needs the vasanas, it needs everything. And then this subtle body is going to activate through the pranas, the physical, material body, So, but what it's saying here, it becomes, the prana is sometimes called the self, atma, the soul of the body. So in our culture, in Vedanta, what we call the soul of the body is the subtle body, is the mind. The mind is the soul. Is the mind, is the subtle body that once disassociates from the physical body, survives. The body dies, the subtle body does not die because the subtle body is the soul. We call it a subtle body. When it leaves the physical body, it somehow it rolls back, so to speak, into a body of vasanas. It remains a body of vasanas, or causal body. It still shines with consciousness. It still has some experience, such as the ones in our sleep state, but it does not have anything new happening to it, to the subtle body, because any new impressions, new experience, new interactions that allows the individual jiva to grow requires the physical body and the dharma field. So once the physical body is not there, we don't have the medium to contact the dharma field. So we become bodiless, therefore we still shine with consciousness, but it's just our vasanas, the content of our minds projecting those different lokas or realms of experience, But when prana leaves the body, it becomes just matter and assemblage of elements. Prana is sometimes called the self, but the soul of the body, but we know that the soul of the body is much more than the prana. It gives us the impression that the prana is the soul, and then the prana left, No, the prana is one aspect that activates the body, that once the subtle body leaves the physical body, we see only the prana disappearing because the prana is more tangible, but the subtle body is absolutely subtle. We don't see, we don't feel, but we can feel that there is something that was here before and it's no longer here, which is the vital air. But what is the soul is not the vital air. What's the soul is the subtle body, it's the mind. But and then the question is, if we say that the prana is the soul of the body, and then we say, and then what is the soul of the prana? What is the atma of the prana? So if we have the prana, the vital air, and we call the vital air the self because it gives life, but what is the other principle that's giving life to this prana, And the answer is the mind. The mind is giving life to this prana. Understand? The mind is what is going to infuse the body with intelligence and infuse the body with prana so that this body becomes animate. The next verse will consider why prana cannot be the self, pure awareness. Verse 49. The prana, sheath, cannot be the self because it is a modification of the air element. It goes in and out of the body, is not sentient, and it's always dependent. Can you hear me well without this? Are you hearing me well? Yeah. because I had to change my laptop, and this one seems to have a better mic, which is very nice. I don't need to be hooked to the machine. So as we know, the prana, this vital air, cannot be the self. Why? Because after all, it is but a modification of the element called air. We know that the first element is space, and out of space, the air comes into existence. So we have this air, and out of this air, the prana is modified, intelligently modified. It becomes the prana that activates the body, physical body. The prana sheath cannot be the self because it is a modification of the air element. It goes in and out of the body. So we know, I mean, if we have practiced pranayama, so you know that, you can do your meditation, and slowly, the breath becomes shallower and shallower, and then there is more and more space in between. There is more and more silence, and one feels cool, one feels at ease, at peace, and then there are moments that the air stops. I still remember when I started having those experiences in deep meditation, that the prana leaves and I become breathless, and it can be a little bit scary, especially when you don't know what's going on. You understand? So we know that this prana goes in and comes out of the body, and it's not sentient, and it's always dependent. So this prana depends on air. It goes in and out of the body. It depends on air because it's a modification of the element called air. Of course, it depends on maya. It depends on consciousness. But as a modification of the air element, it depends on air. And then once it activates the body in all its functions, it depends on its functions so that it keeps going in and out. So if our physiological system, all our functions, they somehow they deteriorate and they stop functioning properly, what happens? So the prana disappears from the body. It goes and does not come back. So it depends on the system, depends on the air, and depends on the system for its own survival. So it means to say that it is a totally dependent principle, depending on maya, depending on the air, and depending on the system itself to keep this self reinforced loop for as long as the system is still functional. There is total dependence. And as we know, the self is the only principle, for a lack of a better word, is the only factor that is free and independent of everything, of all phenomena that may occur within the scope of the self, of consciousness, of awareness. Awareness, consciousness is the only independent, free principle. Everything else is going to have a dependent existence. Consciousness has an independent existence. Why? Because if there is nothing going on, consciousness is still there. As the container, so to speak, in which a lot of dependent phenomena come and go. Interdependent phenomena. People in all cultures have identified the breath with life. The Bible posits an extra cosmic creator who fashions a lump of earth into a form of man and breathes life into that form. So the breath of life is equated to be the breath of God. It's a very nice analogy. The breath of God is beautiful. Huh? It's very nice. Such a notion imparts a divine creative quality to air. Such a notion imparts a divine creative quality to this air. It is air that is purport to give life, sustain life, and withdraw life. It is understandable that a mystic should have formed around the properties of air. So in our culture, this air is not the same air that we see, the breeze going around. This is a very, very intelligent air designed in such a way that it can operate this piece of equipment called the human body with all its functions, all its organs of actions and all its systems, digestion and control of temperature, control of blood circulations, and many other functions. So it's all done by this intelligent vital air, which is a modification of the air that we see around. But this is air which is designed to be operated by the mind, the intelligence of the mind, and activate and vivify the physical body. In the Vedic culture, breath is called prana, and much attention has been devoted to the relationship between breath and the mind. It has long been known that when the breath when we breathe slowly, we have fewer thoughts. Fewer thoughts conduce a calmer mind, which is more pleasurable than an agitated mind. So when we have more thoughts, when we are stressed out, what happens with our breath? And Luciana, the breath goes, no? I'm under stress. There is too many thoughts going on. No? But when I'm in total peace, there's nothing really worrying me. There is no concern. There is no preoccupation, mental preoccupation. There is nothing. I'm at peace. And then the thoughts come down and the breath start coming down as well. Become very, very shallow and slow. So long ago, the yogis, they realized that there was a relationship the same way I realized much before I got to learn anything from yoga or Vedanta, when I started observing those moments of meditation that the breath would stop. And I did not understand why, what was happening there. But very soon we realized that there is a connection here. If my mind is quiet, the breath is very, very quiet, and it feels very, very good. So what we know to be nirvikalpa samadhi is just a breathless mental state. Understand? So the mind stops and the breath stops, and the person can stay there in that state for as long as Ishvara knows. Because the big problem with nirvikalpa samadhi is that it changes, it stops, and people go in and come out of that state. But this relationship between the mind and the breath have given rise to all kinds of pranayama techniques. You want to work on your mind, you have two ways to work on your mind. You can control your thoughts directly, or you can control your breath pattern in a way that by manipulating your breath, you're going to control your thoughts. So the direct way is to address the mind and control your thoughts. You control the thoughts, that is the Vedanta approach through Upasana Yoga. The headquarters is the mind and the production of thoughts. So you want to control your thoughts. You want to bring it to one single focus. You want to bring it to Brahman or to Ishvara or to deity that of one's preference or whatever. So you bring the mind to one and you control the mind. You bring the mind to that thought. When you do that, what is happening? So your system is just calming down. You have nice emotional state, a nice mental state, and you are just there absorbed in this thought, God, Brahman, Ishvara. So this is a way that Vedanta proposed. Let's go and let's work at the root cause of the problem, which is the mind. Let's control the mind. We control thought, we control the mind, and then it's easier for us to control our sense organs, our organs of actions, because we control thought first. But if we begin with yoga, You know, with asanas, for example, we begin trying to work the body, because if you work the physical body, you can calm down the mind and the breath. You begin with the physical body, doing your asanas and so on. Okay? So we all know that when we go to a session of so-called yoga nowadays, we do a 45 minutes of twisting and exercise and this and that. When we come out, so our breath, you know, and our thought, our mind, our emotion, they are much more calm, much more relaxed. You know? So the yogi, it can work through pranayama as well. You know, it just goes, I want to use this technique or that technique that's going to have an effect on my mind. You know, and they developed different techniques of breathing in and holding, and then breathing out, and other or the other way around. They have all kinds of techniques to produce a certain states of mind, you know. So you can work with the mind directly, or you can work with the breath, because the breath and the mind, in fact, the body is a single organism. So the physical body as well, you can work addressing the physical body, addressing your breath, and address your mind. So Vedanta is the last stage of our process of spiritual growth or evolution or elevation, and we address the mind direct. So now we are ready, we have qualifications to address the mind, and we want to keep the mind, to bring the mind to control by the means of understand what brings mental disturbance. You know? Ignorance brings about mental disturbance. I start understanding what is knowledge, what is wisdom, what is ignorance, and then I start bringing knowledge into my ignorance, and then my mind begins to becoming calm, not all the time being stressed out, agitated, you know, disturbed by ignorant feelings, thoughts, and emotions that rise again and again from our ignorance-based vasanas, basically. So in Vedanta, we want to address the mind directly, but when we propose some sort of preliminary stage, we do Kama Yoga is the best. As we know, Kama Yoga, we're going to go about our life, and all our actions are going to be converted into yoga, Kama Yoga. So I act following Dharma with a certain attitude, feeling, devotional contribution. By doing so, whatsoever goal I want to achieve in mind, I am not only achieving my physical material goals, but I'm achieving mental improvement, mental purification, mental refinement, you know, by Kama Yoga. The other means is by meditation, by Upasana Yoga, but then we bring the mind to a symbol of Brahman, Saguna Brahman, or Nirguna Brahman, or any kind of deities that one may choose. Hi, Mark. I think Mark, no. I don't know if you're sleeping or you're going to Samadhi, Mark.
No, I'm in Samadhi, Linda.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just want to confirm that.
Actually,
yes.
what it is I'm reading the script, which is also down below the computer screen. So it appears like my eyes are closed.
Right, yeah. Okay. Yogis have discovered that this connection between the mind and the breath. They discovered that it's possible to slow the breath to a point at which thoughts appear to cease altogether. This is called samadhi, and the ultimate samadhi is called nirvikalpa samadhi. And there is a common misunderstanding in the spiritual world that nirvikalpa samadhi is moksha, or freedom. And it is moksha, and it is freedom. It's total freedom from samsara. It's totally freedom from the world of objects, from duality and so on. But there is only one problem about this moksha, is that it's a temporary moksha. Because the moment that we come out of samadhi, the world appears again, and my vasanas are still intact, because I never address my vasanas, because I did not bring my intellect to follow the logic, to neutralize those vasanas that disturb my mind. You understand? Ignorance-based vasanas. So with Nirvikalpa Samadhi, I experienced this beautiful freedom that's very refreshing. But it is a temporary freedom. And that brings us to a point in our stage of evolution, of growth, that we get tired of having temporary freedom and we want permanent freedom. And that's when Vedanta comes into one's life. And then we say, so if we want permanent freedom, moksha, that is only possible by the means of understanding that you're already free, because you're not the mind. You're not the mind. You're limitless consciousness, and you are free from the mind. That does not stop us from improving the mind. Improving the mind can be a nice vasana, a nice pastime after moksha as well. You understand? You just, okay, now I like to have my mind as sattvic, as peaceful, as calm. So I prefer not to live in a crowd seat and so on. I want to live in nature instead of watching violent moves on Netflix. I prefer to meditate and watch satsangs or read beautiful books or Upanishads and so on. So I can have my life the way I prefer, and I have appreciation for peace of mind. So there is no problem about that. But the Yanni must know that freedom is only possible by understand that I'm not the mind, I'm not my mental condition. Understand? I am free, limitless consciousness. And I don't need to control my experience in order to appreciate and enjoy this freedom, which is only possible by the means of understanding our true nature. So it's very pleasurable, this samadhi. But it has one downside, it does not last. Samadhi can be mistaken for self-knowledge, but the self is limitless. It depends on nothing. Samadhi depends on circumstance, big time. As we know, you can go in a state of samadhi, and then there is a big fly that comes on your face and bites your face, and that is enough to take you out of your samadhi. So, well, you're in samadhi, and then one of those desires or vasanas that they were suspended, they were just dormant, they start becoming activate again, and then a thought comes, a desire comes, and one is out of samadhi. You never know when you go in and come out of samadhi. That's the problem as well. Samadhi depends on so many circumstances, being Ishvara, the big one. A lot of people had experience of samadhi and they want to reproduce experience samadhi. The same way some people have experience, like Mark said, of near-death experience of leaving the body and witnessing the physical body detached from your mind, So people may have this experience. By this experience, they depend on certain circumstances. Being Ishvara, the main one, a lot of this experience we would like to have, deliberately. Oh no, I want to have an out of the body experience tomorrow. Mark will say, no, tonight before I go to sleep, I want to have an out of the body. I want to go around my property to make sure that everything is in place, and then I come to my body again. No, we cannot. There are so many other factors we depend upon to any sort of experience, such as this mystic experience. So samadhi is therefore limited by those variables, circumstances. And the mere cessation of thought is not self-knowledge. Of course not. We experience self-knowledge We experience freedom from thoughts, freedom from the world every night when we go into deep sleep. No? We are totally free, total moksha. Wonderful. That's why we love deep sleep so much. You know, it's a beautiful state of freedom. I'm free from the world. The world is a problem. Have you ever thought that life is nothing but resolving problems? No? So again and again, the body is sick now, the body is this and that, and then the property, and they paying the bills and the tax and this. Oh, now coronavirus. Oh my God. You know, again and again, we have to deal with problems. So when we go into sleep, everything disappears. When life is difficult, we go into deep sleep and we feel totally fulfilled. But just imagine, you are going bankrupt, you are losing your business, you are losing your land, or you are dealing with a very painful separation from your beloved, your wife or your husband is leaving you. You understand? And then you pray to God, oh God, give me a good night of sleep. And then you go, you fall asleep. And then at 5 in the morning, when you open your eyes, and then you remember, I, the Jiva, and then immediately all my problems come back. And then what is the first impulse we have? Is, oh no, please let me go back to my deep sleep. Oh, I want to go back. But no, I mean, once Ishvara pulls us from that state, that total moksha, total freedom, all my problems have disappeared. When it pulls, how many times I try to go back? Almost every morning I say, oh no, it was so good. Oh Lord, please let me go back. And then I try hard and I can't. It all depends on the circumstance called the Lord, the totality of all factors. We experience thoughtlessness every time we enter in a state of deep sleep, but we do not emerge from deep sleep with moksha, with knowledge, no? With self-knowledge. We just experience freedom from the world, and then we are bound to the world, and then freedom from the world, bound to the world. So, but we can never break this prison, this condition, of attachment to the world, the dependence on the world. We can never break that. We can never reach that freedom unless we go into self-knowledge. Self-knowledge means self-inquiry, understanding those power force is ignorance imposed by Maya that makes us attached to the world of objects and dependent. And all this anxiety, expectations, and then frustration that, trying to to get what I want so that I can feel free of limitation. So the waking state and this transaction with the field of object it just serves the purpose to warn us out, to exhaust us until we understand, okay, it does not work. So I only have 6 hours, 5 hours of deep sleep. I experience this freedom, and then the rest of the day, I'm trying to find freedom by the means of, controlling my experience, by the means of running out of the object or controlling my mind, trying to go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But we fail to find that freedom that is only possible by the means of understanding our nature is that which is always ever free from the world, that which does not modify with any experience of the world. This is self-knowledge. And this is not gained in any deep sleep. It's never gained in any deep meditation. It's never gained in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That's the point. So the manipulation of the breath through the science of breath control, also called pranayama, can produce a temporary state of freedom, but it cannot establish us in changeless freedom, changeless consciousness, that which does not change, because the thoughtless temporary mental condition is bound by time, as we have just observed, you know. The energy, the three gunas start modifying when we see our state change. In fact, those states, they never remain the same from one moment to another. They are always modifying a little bit. And then when you see denser and more denser breeds that starts coming, and then there is a little bit more mental disturbance. It can never establish us as changeless consciousness. The verse explains what should by now be obvious, that prana cannot be the self because it comes and goes. That which is limitless does not come and does not go. So prana, yama, so vipassana, and all those meditations, approach, techniques, they have some certain spiritual value, and one of them is to calm down the mind, you know, to process some more sattva in the mind, the mental purification. And I say that by first-hand experience, because when I began meditating, when I met Osho 40 years ago, Osho Rajneesh, so I was not able to meditate. I was too freaked out, too stressed out, you know, very rajasic. It's a lot of psychological problems and so on, emotional disturbance. So I had to do a lot of physical exercise until I started experiencing some moments of silence. And then only down the road, I was able to begin doing Vipassana. And Vipassana was important, absolutely necessary for me. It was part of a long process of years and years of relaxing my mind, relaxing my mind, relaxing my mind, just by bringing it, the focus of my mind into the breath coming in and out of the mind. There's no relationship with God, Ishvara, no deity, with no Brahman, because it came out of Buddhism, this Vipassana meditation. And Buddhism has reject God, has reject the Vedas. You know? But yet, just that exercise of hold my focus on this breath, you know, and it has served the purpose to purify my mind. And then later on, I could do even subtler kinds of meditations until I was brought to Vedanta. So all of these pranayamas and all these all of these sadhanas, they have spiritual values, but they can never deliver self-knowledge. Self-knowledge can only be delivered by self-inquiry, analyzing our experience, following the logic as presented by the Upanishads with the help of a teacher or a friend, you know, that one trusts, and then we can develop this understanding about our nature. But the mind needs to be somewhat purified, prepared, qualified. Furthermore, the prana cannot be the self because it comes and goes. It literally comes and goes. I mean, if we are just living our life, we don't feel that it comes and goes. But once we begin to pay attention to prana in our meditation, we see that it goes all the way out, and then it pauses, and then it comes in. And then after some time, there is some gaps, even more and more larger gaps, that the prana is out and God knows where it went. It's crazy because there is air all over the place, you know? And oh my God, I lost my prana. And now how am I going to get, where I know that my prana has gone? It may have gone anywhere, you know? But somehow Ishvara has such incredible power that brings that air again, and immediately when it enters in contact with me, it is intelligently designed. You know, it cannot be the self because it comes and goes. And sometimes they stay out for some time and then he comes back and then again, you know, it moves my body activates my systems and so on. But the self, the limitless consciousness, never comes and goes because it's that which pervades everything. Everything exists because of this substratum of everything called conscious existence. So this conscious existence is that in which the five kosha, these five sheaths, the physical, the prana sheaths, and then the mental, and then the intellect, and then the anandamaya, all these sheaths occur within consciousness, and consciousness identified as the jiva identifies with those five different levels of human experience and believe, oh, I am my prana, oh, I am my physical body, oh, I am my emotions, oh, I am my thoughts, oh, I am my notions, my intellect, oh, I am my blissful moments. So prana is a modification of air, and air is insentient. The breath does not know anything. It cannot discriminate the self from the not self, meaning to say the breath, although intelligently designed, it's not self-conscious. That's what it means. The breath, although intelligent designed, it's so intelligent that they can operate this highly sophisticated equipment that no scientist can come close to understand the perfection and the level of sophistication of this organism called physical human body or any other creature, physical body of any other animal. So it's intelligent designed, but it's not self-conscious. When it's going to go and do its work, or activate our autonomous systems and so on, and regulate our head, our heartbeat and so on. So it does that mechanically. It's a program. It just knows. It's designed to know what it's doing. You understand? So in life, everything is like that. It's intelligent designed. We know, the baby knows what they do, what to do when he comes out of the womb of the mother, and then immediately he knows that he has to find milk, and he finds its way until he grabs the teeth of the mother and then starts sucking the milk. Who has taught the baby that he has to do like this, to suck the milk? You understand? So everything in creation is intelligently designed, and so is the case with the vital air, the prana. But the prana is not self-conscious. The prana does not do what it does because it says, like, okay, I'm going to go this direction, I'm going to take care of this and that. And you, by the way, activate the organs of actions, and you activate the blood circulation, No, it's not a sentient being, It's just a program, intelligently designed. It is a modification of air. It is insentient. The breath does not know anything. It cannot discriminate the self from the not self. Who can discriminate the self from the not self? The jiva. The self does not discriminate. The jiva, the sentient being, And we have this consciousness that is somehow is provided by consciousness alone as the only source of consciousness, but this consciousness shines in our minds and we become sentient beings. And then we can discriminate the real from the real, the real from the five koshas, this jiva, this sentient being. But the prana, no, the prana is a much lower phenomenon, so to speak. It can never be confused as the self. It has no power of determining anything. It cannot even control its own inflowing and outflowing in the bodily process that depend upon it and on which it depends. In turns, it depends. It can never even control the inflow and outflow. It's not a conscious principle. It's just a program. It's like a computer program. It is a program with no self-awareness. So the teacher has demonstrated that these sheaths of food called the food body, and air, the prana body, are clearly not the self. It's not what we are. So our identification with the physical body and with the pranas is not supported and justified if we really look into the knowledge presented by the scriptures. When we really analyze that, we say, no, it makes no sense. How come I end up believing that I am the vital air and I believe that I am the physical body? Now that I had the opportunity to follow the logic, I can begin dissociating or uprooting those erroneous convictions from my mind by the means of applying, revisiting this logic again and again until I'm convinced that I'm none of those things. I'm the light, I'm consciousness, I'm limitless, never changing awareness. The teacher now proceeds to analyze the increasingly subtle manifestations of Maya that are also mistaken for the self. So we're going to go into the mind. Does anybody have any contribution, any question or anything? Let's see here, there is somebody wrote a question. Okay. Verse 50. The organs of perception and the mind make up the manomaya kosha. It pervades the pranamaya kosha. And it's very powerful because it projects the seeming duality of I and mind. It can be differentiated. It can differentiate names and attributes. Okay, the organs of perception and the mind make up the manomaya kosha. Manomaya kosha is the mental sheath, the mind, in other words. Okay, it's our thoughts, it's our feeling. It's not our intellect. So we are dividing differently the different levels of our experience rather than say the three bodies. We are saying it's 5 koshas. So what we do with the subtle body, we break it into the mental emotional, which is hooked up to the sense organs, okay, the organs of perception, and then the intellect, okay, which is hooked up to the ego. So we do this distinction when we analyze the 5 koshas: the physical body, the pranas, the mental, emotional, sense organ, the intellect, the ego, and then the causal body, the endowed kosha. The organs of perception in the mind make up the manomaya kosha. The manomaya kosha pervades what? Pervades the pranamaya and pervades the physical body. Okay? So the subtler always pervades the denser. It somehow borrows its subtle existence to the below denser phenomena or principles, within the scope of this creation, we can look at it by the 5 elements. The subtler becomes denser and denser, and each one of these elements pervades the next one, and then the next one is going to pervade the other one, and then the other one is going, until we have the space pervading all the 5 elements, the space pervading every constitution, every configuration of all names, of all forms, these properties. Space is always there pervaded because it's the most subtle of all the 5 elements. So we don't need to remind that the self-consciousness is the most subtle, therefore is the most pervasive, because it pervades Maya and pervades space and pervades the entire universe. So the same way, the mind is going to pervade the pranamaya kosha and is going to pervade the physical body. Okay? So this mind or manomaya kosha is very powerful because it projects the seeming duality of I and mind. I say there is a word there that's a seeming duality. So this mind is what allows us to see the world, you know, and then attribute names to the object. And not only that, allows us to experience this duality called I, the experience, the jiva, and the object. You know? So it projects this duality, it brings about this duality spontaneously, unknowingly, naturally. This mind sees the world, and immediately we have a phenomenon called I and the world duality, I and the object. So it appears as if the mind is projecting, but it's just Maya Ishvara through the mind presenting this picture, the superimposition of name, cause, and form. And with that comes this sense of duality. I, the jiva, and the object that appears within the scope of my sense organs, my organs of perception in my mind. So the mind and organs, the mind is always hooked up with the organs of perception because it perceives the mind, the words through the percept organs. The organs of perception. Perception is the 5 horses by which we go into the world and collect experience. You know? So we need that. But then someone could say, well, but how about when I'm just closing my mind, my eyes and everything, and I'm in a quiet place and there is nothing smelling good, nothing, no sense perception, and still I am experiencing subtle objects. So the mind retains those impressions that comes from the contacts with the field. Those impressions, they are called mental, emotional impressions that can be later on experience as the content or the imprints in my mind, my vasanas, my subtle impressions, you know. So it can perceive as well the inner world of our thoughts and emotions, the mental, emotional impression. But otherwise, the mind and the sense organs, they just operate like that. The mind is going to integrate these sense perceptions in one single experience and is going to attribute a name and is going to attribute quality or property. In other words, I like, I appreciate, I don't appreciate, I like, I don't like, and so on. You know? So this is what the mind does, is manomaya kosha. And then immediate this duality between I and the world comes. And here it says very nicely, it's very powerful because it projects the seeming duality of I, that is the, you know, the sense of doership, ownership, the ego, and mind, which is a consolidation of the ego, you know, I and mind. If we stop at I, we're still safe, relatively safe. I exist, you know. But the moment that we begin associate with objects and we start say mind, and then there begins our trouble because we are not only experience duality, but we are making an effort to get hooked up with objects as a means to define myself and fulfill myself, I and mine. And that's what the mind does, you know, it's all in automatic, it's all Ishvara somehow, you know. I and mine, duality and evil. At the same time, this mind is very powerful because it can differentiate or discriminate or determine names and attributes to the object. Analyze, look at the object. I like, I don't like, I can do this and that. This object could serve this purpose, this function. So the mind is intelligent. It reflects consciousness and start playing with the world. And unfortunately, it got attached to the object and it develops this sense of I and mine and suffers this attachment, suffers the fear of losing the comfort of the I and mine. But in that way, we come to Vedanta, going through all of these experience that bring about this phenomenon called samsara, this intense sense of limitation, and insecurity of trying to hold on to what's I in mind, is insecurity, limitation, suffering, brings us to Vedanta. This verse introduced the mind, a term that is neither easily nor universally defined. Yeah. So mind is not easily defined, much less universally defined. Depends on the angle we analyze the mind. If we analyze the mind from the standpoint of psychology, with its emotional aspects and its patterns of thoughts and so on, so we can define the mind in a certain way. But with Vedanta, we address the mind from a different angle. We just call that the mind is a thought that begins with I exist, and it becomes associated with subject, and then we start say I am this and that, according to all these objects, that I use as a means to define myself, my ego, my existence. It's just the self associated to Maya, Jiva, and objects, and then we have the mind, all these associations, this I thought associated with all these other objects. So this is the mind, the bundle of thoughts that get connected, clustered around one single thought that is I am. I am, and then all these other vrittis, other thoughts are going to be associated to constitute or to make up what we call my resume, my life history, that's what I am. The I and all these other thoughts. In the West, the mind is generally pictured as an stable entity, something on the order of a container for thoughts, feelings, and memories. That's interesting, huh? So in the West, it's generally pictured as something that is stable, solid, you know, really contained. Oh, yeah, oh, my mind. Oh, yes, my mind. I know my mind. Oh, it's like this. My history and my thoughts, my feelings, my memories, my story, and so on. We call it my mind. But the mind is no more stable than the notions that ceaselessly come and go in it. In other words, the mind is just a bundle of thoughts that keeps changing. So look at the mind of Luciana, for example. She met Vedanta not long ago. She fell in love with Vedanta. Just imagine what Vedanta is doing to the mind of this young woman. Understand? So she got her mind associated now with a different kind of thoughts, British, this noble, refined, much subtler Brits, which helps us to understand our true nature. And the mind that she had 6 months ago when she first went to India, and the mind that she has now, it's totally different. It had to make space for these incredible subtle thoughts out of the body, out of the box thoughts, That's why we say when you come to Vedanta, one of the qualifications we need is mental flexibility. The mind has to be flexible to start integrating these thoughts that, that nobody think about. So the mind is not stable and fixed and solid, It's just in constant movement. In fact, the mind is nothing more than these notions, these thoughts, To speak of the mind then is to speak of something that does not exist except a series of thoughts. Mind is just thoughts. We're talking about the mind. I'm not talking really about the intellect. Mind is just a process of thoughts, and every thought brings with it a sense, a sentiment, a feeling, okay? A feel. Every thought has a feel to it. So it's emotional thought center. You know, we have the thoughts and the feelings about those thoughts going all the time. So we want to have a healthy mind. We want to hold noble thoughts, you know, fine, loved thoughts, so that I can feel at peace, you know. And I'm having a mind at peace because I want to use it for the purpose of self-inquiry, to understand who I am, what I am. So that's to say that the thoughts that we hold in our mind are very important. Not that we have the power to hold certain thoughts, such as like I am fabulously wealth and rich, and then I'm going to attract all the rich of the world. And it's not enough to say, oh, I am enlightened, I am enlightened, I am enlightened, and then I'm going to become enlightened. No. But the thoughts we engage, we entertain, are going to define personality, character, you know, and is going to direct my life. So I want to engage in thoughts that are going to bring about my spiritual elevation, my spiritual growth. Yeah, I want to think of God. I don't want to think of power, you know, control, prestige, and reach, and you know, and all those things. And I want to have beautiful thoughts that are going to to refine my mind, my intellect. Thoughts, including the most abstract ones, arise from the sense perceptions. A set of perception forms an object, and we give the object a name. The mind is then a function of assigning names to the forms made up through sense perception. To the stability conventionally assigned to the mind is really one, single one. Its consciousness is the only stable, you know, factor. It's the only principle that does not change. You know? And then all these thoughts, you know, regardless of its nature, it keeps changing. And these thoughts are going to be associating. It's a byproduct of our association of the sense organs to the field of object, and then we bring about this contact that brings about a thought and a feeling in respect to that object. I'm going to repeat this sentence because it's very nicely written. Thoughts, including the most abstract, so we are really doing a nice, subtle study of the Brahma Sutras, on those analyses that can be so subtle, you know, and very abstract, very philosophical, and you are just following the logic and you are just there. Including those most abstract thoughts, they are coming through perception. So what it means to say that even when we are engaging very abstract thoughts, they are still based on perception, because the perception are going to bring more denser thoughts, and then from all those denser thoughts, we're going to start analyzing subtler and subtler aspects, which goes into the fields of philosophy, you know, of abstraction, of contemplation, questioning most fundamental principles, such as, so what is existence, you know, what is the nature of consciousness, and so on. So even when it's very abstract, it's all based on what? Perception down here on the bottom. And then we're going to become, the mind becomes subtler and subtler and subtler, and then we start engaging these very, very subtle, abstract thoughts, often called philosophical thoughts. They are all based on perception. A set of perceptions form an object. So the object is a byproduct of perception. This is something very interesting to understand. Because when we experience the object, we experience, in truth, we experience the properties of the object. We don't experience an object. Because the object is nothing but its properties, its attributes, its qualities. And its qualities are perceived by the five sense perceptive organs. So we say that we never really experience the object, we experience its properties. Understand? So if we have a table, and then I use my table here, so how do I know that this is a table? Because I can see that it's a table, I can touch with my hands, and I know that's a table. Understand? So I have I experience the property of smoothness, the flatness, that accommodates things in a very stable manner. So, but my sense perceptions are going to define that this is a table. But what is the nature of this table? It's wood. You understand? So I never really experience wood when I see a table, because I am experiencing the functions, the properties, the qualities of this object called a table. Understand? So this set of perception is what brings about the notion of an object. Understand? The set of perception forms an object, and we give the object a name. The name is usually associated with its function. So what's the use of this object? And then we give it a name. The mind is then a function of assigning names. This is very nice. The mind is then a function of assigning names to the forms which are made of sense perceptions. Very final analysis. Very fine. The stability conventionally assigned to the mind is really changeless awareness. That's the only stable thing. So we note that there is something stable here. There is something that does not change. I call it my mind. But in truth, this stability assigned to the mind is just our conscious awareness. Because our consciousness is the only thing that is stable, never change, never does anything. Right? It's just the background in which all these thoughts, this dynamic interaction of giving and assigning names to different sensory perceptions and so on is just support. And that all happens against this background which does not change, which is absolutely stable. So therefore, the stability conventionally assigned to the mind is really changeless consciousness, wrongly identified with what changed. What changed? The thoughts again and again changing. Why the thoughts change? Because it's all the time a byproduct of sense perception in contact with all sorts of different names and forms. And then the thought keeps changing. But there is something that does not change, and that is stable. But the mind is but a bundle of thoughts that just go like that, and it offers no stability. You understand, when we are identified with the mind, what do we want to do? We want to do mind control, meaning to say, I want to meditate to control my mind. Why I want to control my mind? Because a mind jumping, producing an object to another object, and all the time relates to this object as desires and fears, desires and aversions, So it's a mind that produces discomfort, disturbance, jumping from one thought object to another through this perceptive stimulus. So what we want to do, we want to control the mind. We want the mind to be stable. We want to freeze the mind. But the moment that we stop our efforts to control the mind, what happens to the mind? It's going to activate its sense organ, and the sense organs are going to hook up to the object, to its respective object, and then we're going to be again and again experience ragas and dveshas. Raga dvesha, raga dvesha, raga dvesha, raga dvesha. Mental disturbance, discomfort. The stability conventionally assigned to the mind is really changeless awareness, wrongly identified with thoughts. Very nice. When this misidentification happens, what we call the mind becomes a kosha. Kosha means to say something that hides the true self from us, covers the veils the true self. It superimposes itself on the true consciousness, and then the consciousness believes to be the superimposition. You understand? It feels like, okay, now I consciousness became this kosha. I became the prana. I became the mind. I became the feelings, the thoughts, emotions. Yeah? I became my emotion. Oh, I feel like this and like that. I'm so depressed. I'm so happy. This is all identification with manomaya kosha. When this misidentification happens, what we call the mind becomes a kosha. That is a sheath that conceals our true self, our true nature. Thoughts are made of the most subtle manifestation of matter called sattva. So thoughts is a very subtle energy. It's produced in the subtle body, therefore it's very subtle and it requires a lot of sattva. It is a manifestation of the three gunas. The three gunas are involved in its constitution, but it's predominantly sattvic. So thoughts are made of the most subtle manifestation of matter or energy, howsoever we want to see it. The most subtle matter, as I mentioned last week, subtle matter is energy, or energy is equal to subtle matter. And matter is grossified energy, so to speak. Okay? Energy and matter, they are the same thing. It's just a question of its of its vibration, how subtle or how dense, and all of that in respect to our sense organs, because what we see is a function of our sense organ, or perceptive sense organ. Thoughts are made of the most subtle manifestation called sattva. Awareness is reflect more clearly sattva, as we know, which is the light of intelligence and knowledge. So when we have a sattvic mind, a sattvic thought, awareness shines in that thought and shines more purely. And what we experience when awareness shines in the mind, in a thought which is sattvic, such as Aham Brahmasmi, it produces happiness, contentment, satisfaction, because that is a very sattvic thought. Understand? Thought in itself is sattvic, but if I say, I am fat, I am skinny, I am tall, I am white, I am black, when I just think a thought like that, it's a denser thought, and it does not really produce that sense of satisfaction, such as a very fine, very noble thought, such as those promoted by the Vedas. So awareness is reflect more clearly in sattva, which is the light of intelligence and knowledge. Then it is in tamas, which predominates in inert matter. So awareness reflects much more in sattva, which is the light of intelligence and knowledge, much more than it reflects in tamas. In tamas, awareness basically does not reflect to produce a vritti or thought, because tamas is the inert, it's as inert as it can be. In fact, all physical material object, matter that we find in the universe is due to this predominance of tamas. Meaning to say that the body is matter, the body is tamas. In the rajas, which stimulates body activities, like in the pranas, through the circulation of prana. So we are looking there that awareness is reflecting sattva to produce the mind and the thoughts. It reflects in pranas to produce all activation of the systems of the body. And consciousness does not reflect in the body because the body is inert and it does not shine. So it does not produce thoughts and does not produce movement. It does not activate the body. The body is activated due to another principle that is pranas. Pranas is what's going to give vitality and mobility to the body. Okay, so consciousness through the mind, through the thoughts, the mind of the jiva is going to activate the pranas. The prana is going to activate the body, so that the body becomes mobile. And the mind is going to activate the pranas, and the mind is going to activate the I am thought and all other thoughts, because its consciousness reflects in an aspect of the subtle body, which is highly saturated. So awareness is reflect in sattva to produce the I, the thought, the mental, emotional kosha. This intelligence in knowledge. In tamas, it's just inert. It does not produce any activities, much less neither produce any thoughts, because the body is absolutely thoughtless. And in rajas, it's the nature of prana, which is going to activate the body and all its circulations of pranas and so on. That's a nice summary. To the extent that the self is susceptible of description, the terms existence, awareness, and limitless are usually applied to it. So the only thing we can say about the self, as we know, is that it is of the nature of existence, consciousness, and limitlessness. And these are not attributes, but this is just the nature of what we are. There is no distinction between existence and consciousness. I know that I am, and I am that I know. I know that I am, and I am that I know. So I am that I know. We have no doubt about I know that I am. I know that I exist. Let's call it existence. I know that I exist. We have no doubt about that. And I exist, therefore I know. So I know that I exist. I cannot know without existing, and I cannot exist without knowing that I exist. That's the bottom line. Understand? So the existence and our knowledge, our consciousness, are like the two sides of the same coin. When awareness is reflecting sattva, we know that we exist. We know that we are, but we do not know what we are. Oh, how nice this one. When awareness is reflecting sattva, what happens to eyes? The eyes thought, oh, I am. No? So I was sleeping, my mind was very tamasic, there was no reflection, and then I started changing from the deep sleep into my awakening state, and then when my mind is awake, some sattva takes over, some tamas dissipates, and then this sattva is going to provide reflection of I exist, I am. So when awareness reflects in such a way, we know that we are. Oh, I know what we are. I know I am. Oh, I am. Here I am. Oh, again, came back with all my thoughts, all my problems. So when awareness reflects in such, we know that we are, but we do not know what we are. Why? Because during deep sleep, we never had the opportunity to investigate the nature of this I am, so that I can understand that I know that I am, and I know what I am, rather than I know that I am, and I am this bundle of problems that I have to resolve today. Very nice. The limitless nature of existence consciousness is identified with thought. I mean, it's a wonder, but that's a fact. The limitless nature of our existence consciousness, which is the limitless, as it says, is mistakenly identified with thoughts, with manomaya kosha. We have the I sense, but we try to contain it in the ever-changing objects we believe define us. We believe we depend on these objects for our sense of existence. I depend on my association. I depend on my body. I depend on my home. I depend on my profession. I depend on my husband and wife and so on. So this I sense, we have the I sense, but we try to contain it in the ever-changing objects by which I define this I am. So I know that I exist, but I need to understand what I am. I know that I exist, but I don't know exactly what I am. That's the point. Okay, I'm going to mark it in here. And we carry on right here in the middle of this verse that is an introduction into the manomaya kosha. That's very, very nice. Any contribution, any question, anything to say?
Only, only to know, is this Vivekachudamani the only text that talks about the 5 koshas, or there are only Shankara that talks about it,
No,
comments on it?
this is in many Upanishads. It's
Okay.
Vedanta is relatively simple. The teachings of Vedanta, they are not many, understand? We have many Upanishads, many Brahma Sutras, and then we have Gita and so on. Vedanta is very simple. It's karma, jnana, moksha. You begin with karma, and then you go into jnana, and then you go into moksha. And it has to go through listening, contemplating, and then assimilating. And the teachings, they are not that, it's not that an infinity number of teachings, but they are very subtle. And they need to be presented, by different teachers, different styles, from different angles, different language, but the teachings, they must be intact, And so you find this analysis of the 5 koshas in many of our texts, understand? In many Upanishads as well. Okay, it's nice to look into different Upanishads or different texts of Shankaracharya, and Vidyaranya Swami is our most recent Mahatma, that he lived about 700 years ago. He wrote beautiful, wonderful texts, being the Panchadasi, the most famous, very, very extensive text that I have been teaching on Sundays in Portuguese language. Very beautiful text. It goes as well through through the 5 koshas here and there. The Panchadas is a very nice Swami Paramarthananda, Dayananda, and Ramji. I heard Ramji saying as well, is the most well-organized Vedantic text. It's called the best manual of Vedanta because it was compiled by bringing in all the teachings of Vedanta in one single text. It is extensive. There's 15 chapters, and but it's beautiful, very, very nice. So if we don't need much, we just need to study the Panchadas until we understand, and then we understood everything about Vedanta because everything is in there. Understand?
Okay.
Tattva Bodh is very good for the sheaths too.
Yeah, Tattva is also good to present the basic teachings of Vedanta. Yeah, you just go like present the most important teachings. But it can become, I mean, it depends on our minds. The teachings can go into its subtleties and more subtleties and more subtleties, nuance, you know. It can go very deep when you start unfolding these teachings. And that's what happens with the text, a little more refined text like Panchadas and some of the Brahma Sutras. I have been exploring a little bit of the Upanishads that I find in Shine World and some other translations. And I don't find anything really new, you know. Once you have gone through the Panchadas, and I have had the opportunity to study it and to teach it once, and now I'm teaching second time. And I have been learning from Paramarthananda as well, listening to his Panchadas class that took him 7 years, if I remember well, something like that, to cover once or twice a week. So Gita, Bhagavad Gita is beautiful as well. It's a different way to present the teachings, huh? A nice story. So the self there is personalized as Krishna. And then the dialogue is between Krishna and Arjuna. And the setting is a war, which is a nice representation of life and all the adversities, the battles we have to go through, being the battle between Dharma and Adharma, the most fundamental, you know, the right path and the path of desires, you know, breaking Dharma. Okay. Shall we go? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamanaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you all. We meet again next Thursday, Ishwara willing.
Thank you, Arlindo.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
God bless.
Ciao,
Bye,
ciao.
everyone.
God bless.